So we're going to start with a big one, D.C. policing. Part one of this story is about how we got here, why the Trump administration decided to federalize the Metropolitan Police, so what led up to it, and how a city that's home to Congress, the White House, and the Supreme Court ended up with crime so bad that even people with, let's say, tough reputations and big balls are getting assaulted. So, Lindy, you are up.
Well, this is one of the most controversial stories coming out of this week. President Trump has issued an executive order to basically, he's trying to federalize Washington, D.C. They have a Home Rule Act that passed in 1973, but he's saying that he has the power to take over the city and to help bring down crime. I do want to say that he may not go to the extent that he wants to because Republicans do not have the votes necessary in the Senate for him to fully do this. But there have been howls of protest, not only in D.C., but around the country. Allegations of racism, allegations of bias, that he's clamping down on a city with a significant black population. And I do want to address right off the bat some of the strongest arguments against what he's doing, which I think are ultimately hollow. For example, one of the most frequently brought up arguments is that crime is at a 30-year low. Okay, let's talk about that.
Right.
But crime was historically ubiquitous. Crime has been so high that even if it did come down in recent years, since the pandemic, for instance, it's still remarkably high because our baseline was that high. So please do not gaslight us about that. And also, my co-host Anna brought up a really good point the other day. Someone in the a commissioner, a police commander, was actually suspended because she was cooking the numbers.
Yes, it was actually Michael Pullman from the Metropolitan Police Department has been placed on leave pending an investigation that he had essentially manipulated the crime numbers to make it appear as though crime had gone down significantly. Now, this is the thing about crime statistics. There are all sorts of issues with methodology, and especially when the reporting requires police to submit the data because, the police department has its own interests. They want to make it appear as though they're doing a good job. They want to make the crime numbers look like it's going down because it's a reflection of how well they're performing their duties, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know how realistic the crime going down is. I don't know what the real numbers are because of this issue.
There's more to that, though.
There is.
Go.
So one other thing that I'll just say is, even if you take the current crime statistics as they're reported and you ignore the fact that this, Metropolitan Police Department official has been placed on leave, the crime statistics still are not as low as they were prior to the pandemic. And one of the areas where it hasn't gone down much is carjackings. So depending on which municipality you're talking about, in San Francisco, for instance, they don't have a problem with homicides, but they have a problem with property crimes. In DC, there's a huge issue of literally teenagers doing these carjackings and these joyrides. And I don't think the city has really gotten a handle on it. And the whole thing that kind of sparked this drama is that, that Doge saw. Go ahead, Lindy.
This guy, Michael Cristioni, aka Big Balls, as we all know him, a former Doge staffer, was brutally assaulted in the middle of a carjacking. Actually, the Metropolitan Police is pretty effective in putting an end to it, ironically.
Yeah, they were right around the corner and they saw it all go down.
Exactly. Yeah. And so this was the impetus. My take is that Trump was probably going to do this anyway at some point down the line, and this is the perfect impetus for him.
Right. Can we pull up that graphic again? I'm not sure if that was something that was displayed. Do you want to cue this up? Because there's something I wanted to mention.
Yes,
here.
Absolutely, Amy. The White House is actually saying that he should be awarded the same exact medal as civil rights icon Rosa Parks. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, this is an incident. This is an incident where language is kind of being manipulated a little bit, though, because the medal in question that they're actually referring to here is the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It's been given to a lot of people, actually. It's not a super rare medal to be able to receive. And on that note, what's interesting about the Rosa Parks story, I actually dove into this when I saw that they wanted to give him the same medal that she received. and this is verifiable on Wikipedia as well, by the way. Did you know that like a civil rights movement targeted her and basically essentially asked her to ride on the bus every single day until an incident like this occurred, so that way they could kickstart the civil rights movement. And then they awarded her the medal. There was actually another woman prior to that, well, a girl, actually, she was only 16 years old, that they were going to use. However, because she was a teen mom, they didn't think she would be the best reflection of the face.
Because Rosa Parks is a perfect candidate for them.
I mean, it's smart strategy. I mean, the civil rights movement used the strategy of nonviolence, and then when they were met with violence, it was a way of, being sympathetic figures. And it got more people on their side. I actually think that was a brilliant strategy.
They also had things called sit-ins. They would go to a whites-only counter and then wait to get, talked to. So,
the point,
stay here. Stay with us on this one for right now.
That's actually good because I haven't finished just laying everything out. And I do want to quickly address something really important point that you brought up about police baking the numbers to make themselves look good.
Yes.
One thing that we haven't mentioned yet is the fact that they've been reclassifying crimes altogether.
Yes.
The things that have been previously flagged as felonies are now misdemeanors. So obviously it looks like a crime drop when it actually hasn't been that way.
Can I add one more thing to that? So in that article you sent, Anna, the police union, the Fraternal Order of Police, claims that the practice of lessening the crimes that are put on whatever the report is a broader directive from department leadership citywide. So it's not just Pulliam.
Yeah.
And
it's nationwide. It happens everywhere. And it's a symptom, I hate to say it. I'm sorry, I got to say it. George Soros has been funding extremely leftist prosecutors around the country. It's not just D.C., it's also Philadelphia, my hometown. San Francisco, actually, they got a slightly more conservative guy now, but Los Angeles, for instance, these people are not just soft on crime. Let me be clear. They're limp on crime. They're not doing anything on crime.
I mean, we experienced that in LA for sure. So I know that that's been an issue. Look, the one thing I will say is I'm not one of these people who minimizes the impact of crime on neighborhoods across the country. And like I said, it differs depending on which municipality you're talking about. And each city has its own policing policies and their own policing reforms, right? So the question is, what can we do to solve the increase in crime in these different cities and the type of crime that's increased in these different cities? And when you go to DC and you consider the fact that these carjackings are a problem, they're carried out by groups of teenagers.
Yeah.
So the carjackings, I think, is a symptom of a deeper problem. And I don't know if federalizing the law enforcement in DC is necessarily going to solve it.
Well, obviously they're being encouraged by people. Like, sorry.
I want to go to.
I just have 30
yeah,
quick
of course,
seconds.
of course. And then I'm going to give everybody their chance. But
obviously, these kids are being groomed and coached into that by adults to carry out whatever crimes, to bring back whatever stealings or winnings that they get from these carjackings to the people who groom them to do this. And so imposing those strict punishments on them and federalizing doesn't address the root issue of the people who are grooming them to do it in the first place.
So organized crime.
Exactly.
I agree with you 100%. Go ahead, Kaiser.
Sorry, guys.
Okay. Yeah, so one thing I'll note is that we are much more quick to react to acute solutions to chronic problems than the chronic problem itself. And what's the chronic problem? Well, our capital city, I mean, it's a district, but our capital city in America is a dump. It's degenerating, it's decaying. I just went there for the inauguration. It's gross. It's a bad look for America. And it's emblematic, actually, of the state of cities in America more generally. You know, you go to Singapore, the first place you arrive is a beautiful airport that gives you a perception like, oh, this country has it together. You go to Tokyo, there's little kids and women walking around at night alone, fine.
Yeah.
Super comfortable. You go to DC, you have to watch your back constantly. So they say, okay, well, crime is at 30 years low. Well, what's been going on for the last 50 years? For the last 50 years, crime has been on the rise. It's been too high. And even if there's been a 30% drop, as you said, Lindy, on a baseline of high crime, it's like, that's still bad. So our standards have become so low. And one of the things about chronic issues is you just get used to it. Like you just get used to your city being in decay, or homeless people and mentally unwell people on the sidewalk, or being threatened or catcalled or whatever's happening. And then when someone actually has the big balls to address the problem, then all the attention's focused on them because that's an acute thing. But we haven't been talking about the chronic thing.
Yeah.
So if people want to protest Trump taking action here, I want to see you protest with that same energy against the complete decline of American cities.
Right.
And obviously, just federalizing DC and just addressing crime is not the only thing. Like, there's socioeconomic factors, there's other things to address, but this is a start.
Yeah, that's totally right. And that's totally right. But they're never going to protest the decline. You know why? Because leftists run the cities and they don't want to take any responsibility.
Denying it.
Well,
I think that is
I think
that is a problem. The unwilling look. Here's the problem. If you are on the left and you're offended by this conversation, I need you to understand, when you create a vacuum, when you deny that a problem is a problem, what does that vacuum lead to? It leads to the right coming in with their proposed solutions. Yes. So you're either part of the solution or you're not.
Also, this is just so
Right.
dumb.
Really great
On
point.
every single 80-20 issue, they are on the wrong side. How can you be against cracking down on crime? Are you an idiot?
They're saying
Well, should we play devil's advocate?
I want to play
here?
devil's advocate. Do you want to do it, Anne?
No, you go first. I have one too. I want to hear what you.
Well, okay, because I just litigated it actually on Abby Phillips, and the argument is that he's going to federalize all cities.
But he doesn't have the power.
He doesn't
I
have the
know,
jurisdiction or
I know, but
he
let's.
doesn't even have the power in D.C.
He doesn't, but he did say, let's be fair.
For 30 days, to be clear.
He went on to say, he did. If I need to, I will declare a state of national emergency. And I was like, is that, no, there's no way he could get beyond those 30 days, but he did imply.
All right, well, let me address the national
Congress can
emergency.
But he said he would do it without them by declaring a national emergency.
I got to address the national emergency point.
Go,
Because
please,
he
because
used the
I couldn't
same exact
figure-
argument for tariffs, and let's see how that's panning out. It's right now, it's being tied up in the courts, actively litigated. He may even have to return the tariff payments. That's what it's coming down to. So his threat of national emergency, by the way, I'm absolutely in favor of his actions, but honestly, looking at the facts and the legalese, he may not have the power to do that. So he's blowing smoke, as he often does. But
there are use that.
There are other avenues. So, for instance, the BLM protests and the riots as well happened at first under his first term, and he wanted to declare martial law in order to essentially get a handle on the protests and basically stomp them out. But he had people in his administration at that time who pushed back against him and said, if you declare martial law, we're all going to quit. Wow. And so he backed off and he decided not to do it. With his second term, he's really surrounded himself with people who go along with whatever he wants to do.
They're also much more effective this time.
Sure, but I mean, if he wanted to do something as extreme, in my opinion, as declaring martial law to federalize police all across the country, that is, in my opinion, a legitimate concern. But at the same time, again, I want those who are worried about this, and I am worried about that, to consider the fact that if you ignore a problem, well, then you're going to create a groundswell of support for more authoritarian measures, and that's what's happened. Look at the polling. Look, most Americans are actually in favor of what he's doing.
Yes, it's coming to a city near you, and in Los Angeles, it's like, God, I hope so.
I'll take it, yeah.
You guys, are you aware that
Portland? My gosh.
Democrats are currently -25 on crime. You know where Trump is?
Yeah.
+1. Harry Enton, of all people, said this on CNN.
Yep.
So honestly, the American people are behind this guy.
Yeah, I mean, and it's great. I've heard so many stories of people saying they actually feel safe to leave their house for the first time after years and years of being there. I'm on board with it. Let me just make my position absolutely clear. However, to play devil's advocate, because I always like to feel out both sides of the argument, is the precedent that it could then send when Trump isn't president. See, I trust Donald Trump. I may not trust the person who is next in power. And if this type of precedent is set, it could also be employed, for example, if there is a protest, a legitimate protest, and they don't like the dissenting voices.
That's exactly right.
It could be weaponized against us if we're the ones to leverage this card initially. And so that is the concern in my mind. When I've heard people talk about what they're most worried about, that to me is the most legitimate of them all.
And if you're cracking down on street crime, to your point, you're dealing with the symptom, but is there, what happens when the federalized police, are no longer on the ground fighting street crime, right? Have you dealt with the potential crime rings that are doing the grooming, getting these teenagers to engage in this criminality, knowing that teenagers aren't going to suffer the same types of
thank you
legal
for bringing that up.
consequences?
That's why this is happening. I was actually just speaking with Chris Moritz about this, who wrote a book called Failed State about California. And these child soldiers are being recruited to even commit assassinations because they don't have any type of consequence. There's no more juvenile hall. And two other things I want to throw out to you guys. Apparently, the police chief, Pamela Smith, said that she needs the help.
Exactly.
Wants the help.
Yes.
She plans to work with federal officials to drive down crime. And even the mayor said that she wanted to see how she could make the most out of the additional officer support. So that was very interesting to me. Kaizen, what do you think about that? And what do you think we need to be looking at long term? And then I want everyone to weigh in on this with final thoughts.
Yeah, so we should go back to what was the reason why the Home Rule Act was actually instated. Because originally, D.C. used to be under federal control. And then they said, hey, now we're actually going to allow D.C. to self-govern and have a mayor and have its own local police force. So originally the idea is we need to give this area more sovereignty, and there were black communities in there, and they said, hey, there's basically segregationists in Congress who were calling the shots in D.C., and they said that's unfair. So there was an incentive mismatch that they tried to correct for, but unfortunately, the correction has actually created more crime. So in the long term, what actually needs to happen is we need to figure out, okay, why is there so much poverty in D.C.? First of all, this is an area that has some of the richest zip codes in America, because a lot of our U.S. politicians live in the outskirts, and some of the poorest as well. So why is there so much crime? Why is it that federal law enforcement doesn't have, or sorry, local law enforcement doesn't have the resources that they need in the first place?
That's the part that I found so alarming.
Yeah, so there's something going on in the governance of D.C. that's not right, and that needs to be examined first, or not first, because this is happening first, but second, after we address the immediate issue, which is there's crime happening. But yeah, clearly DC's experiments of having this kind of hybrid local federal governance is not working. It's just not working. So I actually think Trump is well within his rights to take control. He can only do it for 30 days. I think, unfortunately, by the way. But
I don't disagree
yeah,
with you.
he can only invoke this part of the Home Rule Act for 30 days, and then they have to actually figure out a long-term solution. But to the point about, oh, well, what if he does this in all cities? I actually think it's good. I think it's good that he even makes the threat, honestly.
Yeah,
because these other mayors in these cities that are, yes, Democrat-run cities, they're not going to do anything if their position is not threatened. And often what happens with Trump is it's kind of like there's a shock and awe where he draws massive attention to an issue. Like even with tariffs, it's like, yes, other countries have been tariffing us at a higher rate than we've been tariffing them for decades. No one even thought about it before Trump mentioned it. Same thing with crime. We have our cities in decay. No one thinks they can even do anything until Trump says, I'm going to do this thing if you don't get it in hand. So, yeah, I think it's important. I don't know if it's him just trying to incentivize action or he's serious about taking the action, but you need to be a bully sometimes. And I'm glad he's bullying for the benefit of the American people.
Yes.
I want to disagree. I wish I could find a way to disagree because I know the argument. It's like he's authoritarian, he's a mob. But I admit, it's like, please, God, go to a city near me.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
Yes, I have to say, by the way, you are a man after my own heart. Completely agree with everything you just said. I also just want to end with this. I do want to give the mayor credit for not indulging in allegations of racism. She's like, no. Like, if someone tried to bait her on MSNBC and she just didn't take the bait.
Yep.
One thing I want to make clear, when you are only operating at one speed, when you see racism in everything, people stop listening. When you accuse, for example, when you say that Trump's crackdown on crime is racist, when you say voter ID requirements are racist, that meritocracy is racist,
Taking
that
soda off SNAP is racist.
That,
I mean,
exactly, it's
the
strong
list is long.
borders are racist, that putting Americans first is racist. You're the boy who cried wolf. We're gonna tune you out.
More importantly, I mean, look at polling of, Black Americans and how they feel about crime and policing. Because I think that there's a small group of activists that have essentially taken it upon themselves to speak on behalf of Black Americans. But when you look at the polling, Black Americans are worried about crime. They don't want to cut the police force. They want more active policing to deal with it because guess what? You make a really good point about how there's this economic inequality, and that's the through line in a lot of these big cities. There's a lot of wealth and there's a lot of poverty. But what also perpetuates poverty is crime, right? So opportunities are ripped away from people when they don't feel safe in their own neighborhoods. And so I just think that it's really, really important to consider, yes, the socioeconomic factors that play into this, but more importantly, what people actually think about crime and policing based on the polling, what they want to be done about it. Don't let activists basically hijack the narrative and speak on behalf of everyone, because they're usually pushing a specific agenda that might not even jive with people that live in these communities. And consider what these crime incidents do to like young people who, again, will have opportunities snatched away from them if they don't feel safe. If there's like someone selling drugs on the corner of their neighborhood or their street, like these are things that harm people and stop them or hinder the progress in their lives.
In fact, the people who are most targeted by crimes are the people in these black neighborhoods who can't get out.
Right.
They're being terrorized by a small, tiny group of people, and their futures are being hijacked by these crime-ridden neighborhoods. They can never see a way out and a way up. So honestly, we should not, other demographics are able to move elsewhere, but people who are impoverished have to stay where they are. So we got to do everything we can to make sure we provide a safe environment.
Thank you so much for watching Her Take. If you like the show, can you help us out by subscribing to the channel, clicking the notification button, sharing, commenting, joining the conversation? It helps us out a ton with the algorithm. We appreciate you.